Hello, friends! I'm pleased to introduce an exciting course on the analysis of malicious files. If you're an analyst or a cybersecurity professional aiming to delve deeper into the world of malware, then this course is definitely for you. We will explore not only the fundamental concepts of malware classification but also the methods of their analysis. So, what can you expect on this journey into the realm of cybersecurity? Let's start with the classification of malicious programs. We'll delve into how they are structured and how they can be identified. We'll dive into file analysis methods. You will learn what tools and approaches are used to conduct a comprehensive analysis. Then we'll demonstrate how to set up your own laboratory, an essential aspect for practical application and mastering the material. One of the most important parts is the analysis of EXE/DLL files using static and dynamic methods. We will perform analysis of 3 real malwares. And, of course, a crucial aspect: the analysis of Microsoft Office documents. We'll discover how malicious programs can infiltrate through these files and how to prevent it. So, let's get started! Before we dive into studying the analysis of malicious programs, it's crucial for us to understand the types of malwares that exist and their purposes. We're accustomed to calling such programs viruses, but that's incorrect, as malicious programs differ significantly in their structure, distribution methods, and actions carried out on infected computers. We will explore the 4 primary and most common types of malicious programs. And let's begin with a virus. A virus is a program that requires a specific type of file as a carrier. Typically, these files are programs or scripts with extensions like exe, com, bat, sys, and others. Potential victims of such viruses can also include Office programs that support macro execution. Once inside the victim's system, a virus, upon activation, starts seeking specific files for subsequent infection, essentially copying its body or, in other words, its code, into the discovered files. But what purpose do these viruses serve? What actions do they perform on the target machine? Such programs aren't written without reason. Some are aimed at destructive actions, while others aim to extract confidential information. Viruses are created by both simple hackers and specialized agencies. Various information carriers and shared network folders are used to spread viruses from one computer to another. Additionally, they can spread via email. The mechanism is straightforward. If an infected flash drive is connected to a computer, the virus can infect certain files on it. Then, when the user connects this flash drive to another computer, it naturally infects it. This process continues until the computer and flash drive are completely cleansed of all viruses. As you can see, viruses cannot spread independently. They require the intervention of the user for this purpose. Now, let's briefly look at how viruses infect files. One of the oldest methods involves creating a file with viral code that shares the same name as the legitimate file being infected. There are 2 infection methods using this approach. In the first method, files with the exe extension are infected. In the same directory as the file being infected, a viral file with the same name but a com extension is created. Files with this extension are also executable. As you might have understood, the legitimate file remains untouched. But how does the virus get executed? Some users simply type the program's name to execute certain programs. All it takes is to press the Windows plus or key combination and in the open window, enter the program's name. Windows primarily attempts to run the file with the com extension. If such a file is not found, the system runs the file with the exe extension. Once the viral file is launched, it can automatically run the legitimate file to avoid raising suspicion. This infection method has long become outdated, so there's a slightly more elegant alternative. Like in the first case, a viral file is created, but this time with the exe extension. Meanwhile, the extension of the legitimate file is changed to another non-executable extension. After the viral file is executed, the extension of the legitimate file is changed back to exe, and it gets executed. When the virus finishes its work, it changes the extension of the legitimate file back to non-executable. Upon subsequent launches, the above-described procedure repeats itself. The overwriting method involves writing viral code into the area of the infected file. In this process, the code of the legitimate file is partially or completely deleted and replaced by the viral code. As you can understand, the program ceases to function, and there is no possibility to restore it. This infection method is one of the earliest since the emergence of viruses. However, it's practically unused at present. The prep-ending method is a more sophisticated way of infecting compared to the previous method. The viral code is written at the beginning of the legitimate file, causing the program's code itself to shift downwards without disrupting its structure and integrity. When the infected program is launched, the virus is initially executed, and only after that does the code of the legitimate program start running. And finally, the last method of infection in this video is based on inserting the viral code at the end of the file. But how does the virus execute in this scenario? For this, the entry point in the program's header is altered, or in other words, the starting point is changed, explicitly indicating that the viral code needs to be run first. Once the virus is initiated, it triggers the program itself. These are not the only methods for file infection, there exist other techniques. It also depends on the formats of the files being infected. The next type of malicious programs is Trojan horses. They appear as seemingly harmless legitimate programs, yet they conceal hidden functionalities that an average user wouldn't suspect. For instance, it could be an ordinary computer game functioning flawlessly while, at the same time, silently capturing user passwords and transmitting them over the network to a hacker. Naturally, the user remains unaware of this activity. These programs can execute various actions. They spread almost like viruses and require user intervention for dissemination. Trojan horse programs are created using various methods. For example, a hacker may inject malicious code into an already legitimate program and offer it for download to an unsuspecting user. Additionally, a Trojan program might be installed alongside software updates on a computer. As you know, many companies release updates every 3 months, and programs are often set to automatically download and install these updates. If a hacker manages to attack such a company and embed their code into the updates, the repercussions could affect a vast number of users. This occurred in August 2019 with Foxit Software. It's also important not to forget that hidden functionality can be incorporated by the developers themselves. This is typically done in free versions of programs. Network worms are self-sufficient viral programs that, unlike viruses, don't require a file carrier and can rapidly spread autonomously across a network. Network worms find broad application when there's a need to infect a vast number of computers in a short period. These programs are often used by various countries' intelligence agencies. In 2017, a major attack occurred by a ransomware virus called WannaCry. The network worm infected thousands of computers worldwide within hours and encrypted user files to extort bitcoins. Network worms spread independently by exploiting various vulnerabilities in systems. Additionally, they can infect systems through email messages. To better understand the mechanism of worm propagation, let's break down the components of these programs. The very first component is the exploit. An exploit is a small program that exploits vulnerabilities in systems to breach and infiltrate them. Worms may use multiple vulnerabilities simultaneously to ensure maximum success in infiltrating a system. For instance, the WannaCry worm used a vulnerability in the first version of the SMB protocol. Once the system is breached, the worm loads the remaining components. This is typically done using FTP, HTTP, or SMB protocols. Once all components are loaded, the worm starts searching for potential victims for subsequent infection. It checks the Outlook address book to send itself to all recipients and infect their computers. It might also check the ARP cache to determine which computers the compromised computer interacted with on the local network. Overall, the algorithms for finding potential victims can vary, and worms may use one or several algorithms simultaneously. Next, it's necessary to scan the identified targets to determine if they're on the network. If they're available on the network at that moment, the worm infects them. Finally, the payload executes the action for which the worm was created. For example, the WannaCry worm encrypted user files. Some worms establish backdoors for remote access. We'll discuss those a bit later. And finally, the last type of malicious programs in this video is a backdoor. A backdoor is a program that, as shown on the slide, provides 4 types of access to the compromised system. Often, you may encounter programs that remotely control the victim system in either a console or graphical mode. This type of program is disseminated through network worms or viruses. Additionally, a backdoor can be manually installed by the hacker after breaching the system. As an example, on the slide, you see some programs commonly considered backdoors. They were created for legitimate purposes, however, hackers often abuse them. Now let's consider how a backdoor connects to the hacker's server. There are 2 methods. The first method is called direct. Its essence lies in the fact that, upon activation, the backdoor on the victim's computer opens a specific port and starts waiting for an incoming connection, essentially acting as a server. As an example, on the slide, the backdoor opened port 5555 using the TCP protocol. The hacker can connect to the specified port at any time and start issuing commands for control. However, this method has its drawbacks. The issue is that nowadays, most networks have a firewall installed, which, in most cases, blocks incoming connections. Therefore, the second method is often used. In this case, the backdoor independently connects to the hacker's computer on a specific port. The firewall doesn't block outgoing requests in this scenario. Sometimes the hacker's computer might be turned off, and the backdoor fails to establish a connection. In such cases, the backdoor is programmed to attempt reconnecting to the hacker at certain intervals. The classification of programs discussed is classic. Nowadays, many programs combine functions, acting as viruses and trojans, as well as worms and backdoors. We've covered only 4 types of malicious programs, but there are many others that cause significant trouble. Let's now examine the methods employed by analysts when analyzing various malicious files. The slide shows these methods. Typically, when analyzing files, these methods are used in the order they are illustrated. However, in practice, the sequence can be arbitrary. Surely, you might be wondering why we even need to analyze viruses, trojans, and other malicious files. Primarily, analysis is conducted by companies developing antivirus products, as well as various large corporations and banks. If one or multiple computers have been infected, the analyst's task is to determine the nature of the discovered malicious program, how it spreads, activates, and how to detect and neutralize it. Now, let's briefly consider the methods for file analysis. The very first and fastest method is the use of so-called sandboxes. Sandboxes are isolated computers with a specific operating system where the investigated files are automatically analyzed. During the analysis, running processes, network activity, deleted, open, or closed files, and much more are examined. The use of sandboxes is highly convenient, they save time, do not require extensive expertise in file analysis, and allow the simultaneous analysis of multiple files. Often, many analysts resort to such systems for initial analysis. If the results are unsatisfactory, they proceed to manual analysis. Despite all the merits of sandboxes, they do not guarantee 100% accuracy in analysis. Some malicious programs can detect the presence of a sandbox and alter their behavior. Furthermore, the malicious activity of a virus or Trojan may be triggered by a specific event that may never occur within the sandbox. Also, it's important to remember that programs, whether malicious or legitimate, are written by people. And people often make mistakes, resulting in a seemingly legitimate program that might appear malicious. In such cases, sandboxes might flag the program as a virus. Therefore, analysts will have to manually determine whether it's a virus or not. Now, let's consider manual analysis methods. The first and simplest is basic static analysis. Here, we merely examine various properties and metadata of the file. Based on these file properties, we can indirectly determine whether it's legitimate or not. On the slide, you can see some properties that are typically analyzed. We'll delve into these properties in one of the upcoming videos. As you've understood, in basic static analysis, the file isn't executed, and its code isn't analyzed. Therefore, it's generally possible to analyze the file in a non-isolated environment. However, it's crucial to change the file extension to prevent accidental execution. Nevertheless, make it a habit always to analyze files in a specially prepared and isolated computer. Basic dynamic analysis involves executing the file and observing its behavior. As always, network activity is analyzed because the file might contact its server and transmit information. Additionally, it might download supplementary files for further computer or network infection. Apart from network activity, the registry, created processes, opened or deleted files, and much more are analyzed. In this method of analysis, we also don't analyze the file's code or delve into its internals. However, by observing its behavior over a specific period, we can already deduce its functionality. In some cases, basic analysis methods may not be sufficient. Malicious programs might detect that they're running in a virtual machine and won't exhibit active behavior. Additionally, some programs might activate based on specific events. To better understand a program's logic, it's necessary to look inside it, meaning to see its code. This can be done using programs that convert machine code into a textual language called assembly. Each processor supports its own assembly language. To read code in this language effectively, one needs to understand the structure and logic of the processor's operation at least at a basic level. The larger the program, naturally, the longer the code, making it more complex to read. Finally, the last analysis method is the advanced dynamic method. Here, knowledge of processor operation and assembly language is also necessary. With the advanced static method, we can read the code itself and understand the program's logic. However, it's one thing to see the code and envision how it works, and quite another to observe how this code behaves under different conditions and parameters. Therefore, we run the program, but this time within a special debugger. Using the debugger, we can step through the program's execution, change input parameters, and observe how the system reacts to these changes. As you can understand, these last two analysis methods require good knowledge and patience, especially for beginners. In this course, we'll cover basic analysis methods and provide necessary examples for better comprehension. To conduct the analysis, we'll need an appropriate laboratory environment, which includes the following components. A computer or laptop with sufficient disk space, as you'll need to install multiple virtual machines. For virtualization, I recommend VirtualBox. VMware is also good, but its free version has certain limitations. Once you've installed virtualization software, you can install the desired distribution for analysis purposes. The most well-known and frequently used distributions are Remnux and Flare VM. Essentially, both distributions contain almost the same set of programs. However, I would recommend using both. Kali Linux can be used as a network simulator. Often, a launched malicious file sends network requests to transfer information or download additional files. Therefore, to detect the network activity of a virus, we need a network simulator, which Kali Linux serves as. Moreover, with this operating system, you can generate exploits and virus files to practice analysis. After installing VirtualBox or VMware Player, it's necessary to understand their networking settings. To install and update programs on virtual machines, you'll need internet access, but for analyzing virus files, it's essential to completely isolate the machine to prevent the spread of the virus and further infection of your host machine and all other computers in the local network. Next, we'll explore the networking settings of virtualization programs. Let's begin by examining where the network settings are adjusted in these programs and then delve into each option in detail. Launch VirtualBox. Select the desired virtual machine. The network settings are available in this section. From the drop-down menu, you can choose the necessary option. The most interesting for us are bridged network, internal network, and virtual adapter. We'll delve into these a bit later. Now let's see where you can modify settings in VMware Player. Select the virtual machine, then go to Edit Virtual Machine Settings. In the window that opens, on the left side, choose the Network Adapter option. All available network parameters will appear on the right side of the window. They have almost the same names as in VirtualBox. Now, let's explore how and in which scenarios each parameter can be applied. And we'll start with the bridged network. Let's say we have a computer or laptop connected to a modem or router. The operating system we're using is Windows 10. We've decided to install two virtual systems. In our case, it's Windows 7 and Linux. When we select the bridged network mode, the virtualization software starts operating as a simple LAN switch, connecting the virtual and host machines together. What does this type of connection provide us with? As you've already noticed, the virtual and host machines can interact with each other. Additionally, the virtual machines can connect to other computers in the local network since they all receive IP addresses from the same subnet. They also have access to the internet, which is crucial during software installation. This type of connection is recommended during the initial setup and configuration of the virtual machine. The next type is called internal network. Its purpose is to fully isolate the virtual machines from the host system as well as from the local network and the internet. However, the virtual machines themselves can interact with each other. If you have multiple virtual machines installed, you can create an unlimited number of separate internal networks, dividing and combining specific virtual systems. The main feature of the internal network is the complete isolation of virtual machines from the external world. Additionally, on each virtual system, you'll have to manually set network addresses. As you've understood, this type of connection is ideal for testing and analyzing virus files. You can safely perform any manipulations with malicious files. And finally, the last type of connection worth mentioning is called the host-only adapter. When you install VirtualBox or VMware, an additional network interface or adapter is installed on your computer. To see this adapter, open the command prompt and enter the IP protocol configuration command to display all network interfaces. You'll see something like this. Essentially, these interfaces act as a virtual DHCP server to assign IP addresses to virtual machines. Let's look at what the logical connection scheme would look like. It resembles an internal network, but there are slight differences. So, what are they? Firstly, virtual machines can connect to the host system for file exchange. The interaction happens precisely through the established virtual interfaces. Another feature is that there's no need to set up IP addresses manually. They'll be automatically assigned using those same virtual adapters. While the virtual systems remain isolated from the outside world, they can exchange files with the host system. This connection type is often used for virus analysis and execution. However, I wouldn't recommend using this setup, as a mistake could lead to unintentional infection of the host system by a virus. For file analysis, a special Linux-based distribution was developed. This distribution is called Remnux. Let's try to install it. You can download Remnux from the official website, as shown on the slide. There, you'll find detailed instructions on how to install and configure the system. Additionally, you'll discover a list of programs included in the distribution for file analysis. There are two methods available for installation. The first and simplest method involves importing a ready-made virtual machine image into VirtualBox or VMware Player. The second method involves installing Remnux on an existing 64-bit Ubuntu system. However, there's a slight limitation. The installation will only be successful on the 14th version of the Ubuntu distribution. Let's first try the first installation option. To do this, we open the project page. Scroll down a bit. Here, there's a link provided for downloading the image. Download it. Now that the file is downloaded, we can import it into VirtualBox or VMware. As an example, let's import it into VirtualBox. To do this, open the File menu and select Import Applicants. Choose the downloaded file. Then click Next. This opens a window with virtual machine settings. If desired, you can change the settings now or later. Click on Import. Now, we just need to wait until the entire import process is completed. So, the process is finished, and here is how the imported machine looks. Let's start it. As you can see, everything is functioning. The list of installed programs is available through the menu. However, most of them operate in a console mode, so it's sufficient to open the terminal console and run the programs from there. As you've noticed, this method has a drawback. The virtual machine can't be expanded to full screen. This might be due to video driver limitations, or there could be another reason altogether. Let's explore another installation method. To do this, let's navigate to the documentation section on the website. On the left-hand side, you'll see the page menu. Open the Get the Remnux Distro section. Then select Install Remnux on an existing system. Here, there's a description of how to install Remnux on Ubuntu. But first, you need to install Ubuntu itself. For this, you can use the minimal version. Or you can install the full desktop version. The link to the Ubuntu website is provided with the lesson. The installation process itself is simple, so I won't dwell on it separately. It's crucial during installation to create a user with the name Remnux and the password malware. When Ubuntu is installed, you can start installing Remnux. For this, you'll need internet access. Open the network settings of the virtual machine and choose either NAT or bridged adapter. I'd recommend using bridged adapter for home networks and NAT for corporate ones. Start the machine. I already have Remnux installed, as you can see, so I'll just demonstrate the command that needs to be executed. Open the terminal. Here, we need to run a command that will download and run a specific script. For this, go to the documentation website. Copy this command. Now, paste and run it. This process may take up to an hour. After installation, you'll find instructional files on the desktop with guidelines on using Remnux and lists of installed programs. Because Flare VM runs on Windows, first, we need to install the Windows virtual machine itself. Then, we'll download a specific script that will download and install Flare VM. To download the Windows virtual machine, let's visit the official Microsoft website. Choose the desired operating system. As an example, let's select Windows 7, but you can also use Windows 10. Then, select the virtualization program for this machine. Let's choose VirtualBox. And download. Once the image is fully downloaded, extract the zip archive and import it into VirtualBox using the same method we used for Remnux. So, the machine has been successfully imported, and the default networking settings are set to NAT. This is sufficient for internet access. Let's start the machine. To install Flare VM, we need to download a special script. To do this, open the website github.com. In the search field, type the project name, which is Flare VM. Open the first page. Here, you'll find the script itself and installation instructions. To avoid any difficulties, let's walk through all the steps and install Flare VM. So, download the archive. And extract it. Then run PowerShell as an administrator. Keep in mind that the login and password of the administrator user are displayed on the desktop wallpaper. We'll need them shortly. The instructions mention that we only need to execute 2 commands. Let's run them. For convenience, I'll first navigate to the folder where I've extracted the script. This is done using the cd command, meaning change directory. Now, execute the first command. Press the Y key for yes. And enter the second command. Here, we'll need to enter the previously mentioned login and password. Press enter, and the process begins. There's no need for your active intervention, but during the installation, the virtual machine will restart several times, and you might need to enter the password. The installation takes about an hour. Sometimes there might be failures, and you might need to start over. So, patience is recommended. After a successful installation, you'll have access to new programs. For your convenience, all the links and shortcuts are gathered and organized in a single folder. Some malwares, when they infect a victim's computer, attempt to establish a network connection. There are various reasons for this, such as downloading additional files or transmitting data about the victim, among others. When analyzing such programs, it's necessary for us to simulate a network to understand whom they are trying to contact. The principle of operation is quite simple. On VirtualBox or VMware, we install two operating systems. In our case, on Windows, we run the virus, and on Linux, we run a program that simulates all possible network services, DNS, HTTP, Telnet, SSH, and so on. On the machine under analysis, the IP address of the virtual machine simulating the network is set as the gateway. Consequently, all network requests are directed to the simulating machine. When the malware attempts to download additional files, it naturally sends a DNS request. The simulator responds to the request, providing its address, and waits for further connection. The malware, upon receiving the address, tries to establish a connection with its server. However, in our case, it connects to the simulator. You can intercept all network packets for further analysis. As a simulator, I would recommend installing the Kali Linux operating system. It already has the initsim program installed, which serves our purposes perfectly. So, let's get started. To start, you need to download and install Kali Linux. Open the official distribution website kali.org. Then, in the Download section, select Download Kali Linux. Here you have two options. You can download the distribution image and then step-by-step install the entire system. Alternatively, by scrolling down a bit, you can download a ready-made virtual machine for VirtualBox or VMware. Personally, I prefer the second option. You can import the downloaded virtual machine using the same method as you did with Windows. Now, on VirtualBox or VMware, let's set up an isolated network mode, which is the internal network. Start the machine. We'll need to enter a login and password. This information is available in the machine's description. Let's set static IP addresses. Right-click anywhere on the desktop. In the context menu, select Settings. A window with various settings will open. Choose the network option, click on this gear icon, and go to the IPv4 tab. Set the mode to manual, and in the addresses field below, enter the desired address. As an example, I'll enter the address 172.16.1.1 with a mask of 255.255.255.0. In the top right corner, click on the Apply button. Now, we need to restart the network interface to apply the settings. To do this, move this slider twice. Let's configure the initsim program itself. There's nothing complicated about it. We'll simply open the configuration file and remove the commenting symbols. Open the file manager, go to Other Locations, and then to Computer. We're in the root directory now. Open the etc folder. As there are many files and directories here, it's better to use the search function. In the search field, type inetsim. We're interested in the inetsim folder. Inside it, there's only one text file. Let's open it. At the beginning, you'll see a list of supported services. Scroll down a bit. We're interested in the service_bind_address section. Make sure that the service_bind_address parameter is set to 0. Also, remove the hashtag symbol before the parameter if it's there. Scroll down again. We're interested in the DNS_default_IP section. Here as well, remove the hashtag before the DNS_default_IP parameter and set the value equal to the IP address on the local machine that we set recently. Save the settings and close the file. Now, all that's left is to start the program itself. Open the terminal and type the command in etsym. That's it, the program is launched. To demonstrate the simulator's functionality, let's start another virtual machine. First, set up the internal network mode. Start the machine. Change the network settings, meaning set static addresses within the same range as the simulator. In my case, I set it to 172.16.1.22, and for the default gateway, I'm setting the address of our simulator, which is 172.16.1.1. Now, let's try a simple ping to any site, for example, mail.ru. As you can see, the ping goes through. Pay attention to the received address. Next, let's open a browser and type in google.com. The page opens. Everything seems to be working here. Now, we can proceed to analyze malicious programs. Now that we have our virtual machines set up, we can conduct various analyses with samples of infected files. However, the question arises, how do we revert the virtual machine to its initial state for further analyses? We wouldn't want to reinstall the virtual machine every time. Fortunately, virtualization programs have a feature called snapshotting. What does this mean? It means that we create a kind of restore point where we save absolutely everything about the system, installed programs, settings, and more. We can create as many of these restore points or snapshots as we need. When necessary, we can revert to a previous state by restoring a specific snapshot. In this video, we'll see how to create snapshots in VirtualBox. The VMware program supports snapshot creation only in its paid version, so we won't be covering it here. Launch VirtualBox and select the newly installed Windows machine. Then, in the Machine Tools menu, choose the Snapshots option. Create the first snapshot. You can rename it and add a corresponding description for clarity. Now, start the machine and try changing some settings. As an example, let's change the desktop wallpaper and network interface settings. Now set static addresses. Now, let's try to restore the previous settings and revert the machine to its initial state. This can be done in two ways. When the machine is running, we can close it just like any program in Windows. An immediate window will pop up with three options. Choose the option Power Off the machine and immediately the Restore Current Snapshot checkbox becomes active. Check the box and click OK. Upon the next start, the previous version will be restored based on the snapshot taken. The second method is used when the machine is already turned off. Select the relevant snapshot and click on the Restore button in the top panel. Confirm the action, and the machine will be restored. Now, let's start the machine again. And as you can see, the desktop wallpaper has returned to its previous state. Let's check the network settings. And here, we have the default initial settings as well. As you can see, it's straightforward. For testing purposes and to gain experience in file analysis, you'll need various virus samples that you can download onto a virtual machine and experiment with without any concerns. But where can you find such files? Specialized repositories will assist you with this, as they store such files. The slide presents just a few of them. These repositories categorize malicious files into various types, such as viruses, trojans, Office documents, executable files, and more. This way, you can filter the file you need and download it for further analysis. Personally, I prefer hybrid analysis. This platform stores reports and samples of all uploaded and analyzed files, allowing you to view any report that interests you. However, this feature is available after registration. Let's take a look at what this sandbox represents and try to find and download the file we need. Here's what the sandbox site looks like. On this tab, you're prompted to upload a file for analysis. As we're looking for a virus file, let's go to the Report Search tab. Now, let's click on the Advanced Search button. Here, you're prompted to enter keywords to search for specific files. For instance, let's find DLL files. To do this, select the File Type field and from the drop-down list, choose PDLL. Now, since we're looking for an infected file, in the Verdict field, select Malicious. That's pretty much it, but if you want to narrow down the search even further, you can use the other options. For example, in the hashtag field, specify the file's family or category. As a hint, you see the word ransomware. Ransomware is a category of encrypting viruses that encrypt your personal files and demand payment for a key that supposedly decrypts them. Let's enter the word Trojan. And here's what the platform gave us. Sample is the virus sample, clicking on which will download the necessary file. However, don't rush. First, study the report to get an idea about the virus. In the report, you'll see indicators that in some way point to signs of infection. Some things might seem unclear at first, but don't worry, you'll learn about all of this in the course. I recommend downloading both the file and the report. After conducting your own analysis, you can compare both results. Now let's look at how to conduct basic static analysis of a file. As you know, the file being analyzed isn't executed. We simply examine its various properties to check for suspicious artifacts that may indirectly or directly indicate that the file is infected. So, what artifacts are we looking for? Here's a list of them on the slide. Some of these terms might be unfamiliar to you, but there's no need to worry, as after watching the video, you'll know what they are and how to work with this data. In this presentation, I've tried to present the information in an understandable order for you. However, during practical analysis, the sequence might be entirely arbitrary. As you start the analysis, it's crucial to compute the file's hash first. It's a kind of unique digital fingerprint of the file, composed of a specific sequence of digits and letters. Keep in mind that the hash is independent of the file name and only depends on its content. So, what does the hash give us? It allows us to search for a suspicious file across various antivirus databases. The most popular one is VirusTotal. If this file exists in the database, we can obtain comprehensive information about it, potentially concluding the analysis at this stage. Additionally, it helps in verifying the authenticity of a program. For instance, when you download a program from a website, the site often provides the hash calculated by various algorithms. After downloading the program and computing its hash, you can compare your hash with the one provided on the site, thus confirming the authenticity of the file before you. The slide shows an example of searching for a file by its signature on the VirusTotal website. As you can see, 36 out of 57 antivirus programs were able to identify the file, marking it as malicious. Most antivirus programs classified it as a Trojan. To compute hashes on Flare VM and Remnux, there are numerous programs available that offer various hash computation algorithms. We will get acquainted with some of them during the practical session. The next analyzed artifact is strings. Strings represent words or entire phrases in ASCII and Unicode encodings. Through them, you can to some extent determine what a program does. To better understand, let's consider a simple example. You are presented with a code fragment. When a programmer or hacker writes a program, it contains comments, explanations, string variables, and so on. After the program is written, it is compiled and transformed into an executable binary file. Meaning, you won't see the readable original code anymore, but the comments and string variables used in the code will remain unchanged. You can easily confirm this by opening any EXE file in Notepad. You will see a set of incomprehensible and meaningless characters. Amidst this gibberish, you will also be able to discern those same ASCII and Unicode characters. In the presented code fragment, you see some phrases, and based on them, you can make assumptions that the program is attempting to connect to an FTP server with a specified IP address. Additionally, you notice the file name. We cannot precisely say what it is used for, perhaps it's being downloaded, read, or an attempt is made to write new data into it. Strings is a very useful artifact as it allows us to gather a lot of interesting information. However, it's important to filter the obtained data because along with meaningful words and phrases, we might also encounter many unnecessary and meaningless characters. Keep in mind that a proficient virus maker is aware of this feature and may intentionally mislead by introducing distracting words and phrases. Alternatively, they might attempt to write code with a minimal set of ASCII and Unicode words. On this slide, there are some programs that will help you detect strings. Some of them operate in command line mode, while most offer a convenient graphical interface. The next artifact is the entropy value of the file. Entropy shows how random the binary data sequence in the file is. At the bottom of the slide, you can see an illustrative example of the entropy value. The higher the level of data randomization, the higher the entropy value grows, approaching its maximum. You might wonder, how can this information be applied in practice? High entropy values indicate that encryption or compression algorithms have been applied to the file. These algorithms are used to evade antivirus software. However, keep in mind that high entropy values are also present in legitimate programs. So, upon detecting certain anomalies, don't rush to a final verdict, analyze the other parameters, which we'll discuss later. Now let's move on to one of the important topics. Since we're analyzing executable files, it's crucial to understand their structure. All Windows executables, whether with extensions like EXE, DLL, sys, and others, share almost the same format called portable executable. The file itself consists of headers and sections. We won't delve into all the details of this format, we'll focus on aspects that are of interest to us as analysts. Within the NT header, the compilation date and program type, either graphical or console, are specified. The subsequent header group contains information like the program's entry point, indicating where and how the program starts, disk and memory code size, and much more. Following the headers are the sections themselves, which contain the executable code. Usually, these sections are named as indicated on the slide, but there's no strict standard, and some programs might have different section names. However, most programs follow these designations. The number of sections can also vary, which is normal. The slide shows 4 commonly encountered sections. The text section holds the program's code, performing the actions for which the program was created. This section is always present in all programs, although its name might vary at times. The data and data sections contain some necessary data and variables for the program's operation. In the RSRC section, or resources, you'll find resource objects and files like icons, images, dialog window graphics, and so on. Now, let's understand what information we should seek and how to use it. Firstly, check the timestamp or the date when the program was compiled. If it's an old date, it's likely that this virus has long been detected, and public databases might contain information about this file. Also, based on the time zone, you might determine the probable origin of the virus. For instance, if it indicates Pacific Standard Time, it's likely created by individuals in China. If it's Eastern Time, it's possibly from the United States. However, bear in mind that this parameter can be easily altered during the program's compilation. Sometimes virus makers manipulate the time, indicating distant future or past times. If you encounter such discrepancies, it's a clear indication that it's likely a malicious file. Pay attention to the program type, whether it's declared to have a graphical or console interface. If a program is supposed to have a graphical interface but turns out to be a console program during analysis, it's not entirely legitimate. For example, if you download a game from an unknown site claiming to have a graphical interface but the analysis reveals it as a console program, it's suspicious and worth reconsidering launching it. Also, scrutinize the file's section names. While many developers stick to commonly accepted names, some malicious files have entirely different section names. This often occurs when files undergo encryption and compression to evade antivirus detection. Hence, encryptors change section names and introduce new ones. The parameters virtual size and raw size indicate the code's size in memory and on the hard disk, respectively. Usually, under normal circumstances, both values are approximately the same. However, if the raw size is significantly smaller than the virtual size, the section might have been compressed to bypass antivirus checks. Sometimes, virus makers place executable malicious code in the resources section. When the infected program is run under specific conditions, it executes the virus code stored in that section. Ordinary legitimate programs do not store executable code in this section. Hence, if you discover such content, it's likely malicious. The slide presents an analysis fragment of a virus file. Immediately noticeable is that the section names are unknown, indicating that the analytical program failed to read them, which typically does not happen under normal circumstances. Next, we observe anomalous entropy values. Finally, pay attention to the raw size and virtual size values. As you can see, they significantly differ in all three sections. Based on this information, it can be stated with absolute certainty that the file underwent encryption and compression to alter its signature and evade antivirus detection. Moreover, without decryption, it will be challenging for analysts to look inside the file to read its code using a disassembler. It can definitively be said that this is a malicious file. For analyzing files in portable executable format, you have access to the following programs. In the first part, we encountered the fact that malicious files can be encrypted and compressed to alter their signature and bypass antivirus software. This is achieved using specific programs called packers. It's easy to confirm this by taking any file, compressing, or encrypting it using any archiving software, and then comparing the hashes of both files. You'll notice they differ. Let's consider the principle of operation of such a program using a simple example. Here, we have a typical EXE file. We subject it to compression. The size, of course, decreases. Now, the question arises, if the file is compressed and encrypted, how do we restore it to its original state upon execution? The answer is simple. The packer program adds a special microprogram to restore the original program. Naturally, a new header is added indicating that the primary task is to run that microprogram to restore the original file. As a result, we get a new EXE file. Here is how the file execution process looks. Keep in mind that these processes occur in memory, not on the hard drive. In other words, on the hard drive, we still retain the compressed and encrypted file unchanged. If you conduct a basic static analysis of such a file, the results will be significantly distorted, and much of the data will be inaccessible. Therefore, once you detect a packer, it's essential to first restore the original file on the disk and only then proceed with the analysis. On the slide, there's a list of some packer programs. One of the most popular programs is UPX. Essentially, there's nothing inherently wrong with using such programs, as some legitimate programs also use them to reduce their size. However, virus makers often abuse them. Now let's consider the indicators that can help determine if a file has been processed by a packer. First, pay attention to the number of strings in the file. If there are very few, it's likely due to the packer. High entropy values also indicate the involvement of a packer. Another confirmation is the significant difference between the memory space occupied by the file's header sections on the disk versus in the RAM. If the space on the disk is much smaller than in RAM, it means the section was compressed. Lastly, check the imported libraries. We'll discuss them later in this lesson. Just know that encrypted files have very few of these. Typically, functions like load library and get proc address are present. These functions are necessary to load into memory and run the microprogram for unpacking the main file. Here, as an example, the slides display screenshots of program analyses for packer presence. In the first image, you see Microsoft Visual C++, which is a program compiler. Programs can have various compilers, so if you see a compiler, the file wasn't processed by a packer. In the second instance, we have a different program displayed, not a compiler. A simple Google search would inform you that it's a packer. To determine the packer, in both virtual machines you have access to several programs. However, keep in mind that there are many packers available, and furthermore, virus makers often create their own packers, so the programs listed on the slide may not accurately identify the type of program used. Also, you should know about other types of programs commonly used by hackers. They're known as binders, wrappers, or joiners. Their principles of operation differ slightly, but they achieve the same result. With these programs, you can inject a virus or another program into a legitimate executable file. As a result, you create a trojanized program that can function normally, but when the infected file is executed, the malicious file is activated as well. There are many such programs available, both paid and free. For instance, if you are familiar with Metasploit, you can practice using the program's Venom. There is a similar program available on Windows as well, although it was developed for legitimate purposes. By what signs can you determine that a legitimate file has been infected with a virus? Firstly, check for the presence of a digital signature. Whenever a virus is introduced into a file, the digital signature of the legitimate file is often compromised, if there was one to begin with. However, skilled hackers can effortlessly forge a signature and append it to the file to avoid raising suspicion. Therefore, also inspect the file's header sections. If you notice sections with identical names and 2 or more sections with executable code, it's likely a trojanized file. A regular file typically contains only one section with executable code. In the illustration, you can see an example of a trojanized program. Pay attention to the sections named text. Despite having identical names, they have different entropy and size. Now, we're delving into the study of imported libraries. They are files with the extension DLL and contain executable code. But what are they for and what benefit do they bring? Library files enable the execution of specific actions, such as network interaction, processing of graphical objects, interfacing with the file system, and more. All these files are already present in Windows, so programmers don't need to write new code when creating their programs. For instance, imagine you, as a programmer, decide to create a network game. Since the program will operate over the network, you don't need to write separate code for handling all network operations. You can simply leverage existing libraries, import them into the main program, and use them as needed. This reduces the amount of code and simplifies the program. Now let's explore how library files are linked to the main program. The first method is static. In this approach, all the code from the required libraries is simply copied into the main code of the program. Naturally, this significantly increases the size of the resulting file, which isn't always convenient. However, this method ensures the program isn't dependent on the availability of required libraries in the system. Typically, this method is practiced in Linux systems. The second method is used when the required library needs to be linked during the execution of the main program. For example, a user works in a program for a certain period, then wants to save a file. Now the user chooses the file saving option. The program loads the library responsible for file operations. This method is frequently employed in malicious programs. Lastly, the third method is dynamic. With this approach, all necessary libraries are linked and loaded into memory at the start of the main program. It doesn't matter if some of them are never used. Let's take a look at 2 commonly encountered library files as an example. User32 is always used in programs with a graphical interface as it contains functions for working with buttons, dialog boxes, forms, and other graphical elements. When analyzing the file, pay attention to the functions depicted here. With their help, keystrokes and mouse movements can be tracked. These functions are precisely what keyloggers use to intercept typed text. The EXE library is used to manage the user authentication process within the system. The depicted functions are often used to extract user logins and password hashes. I recommend exploring programs like Mimikatz and Windows Credential Editor. They specifically utilize these functions to obtain user passwords. Now that you know what library files represent, let's discuss general analysis principles. Firstly, determine which files are being imported. Then, start searching for suspicious functions commonly used by malware. Based on the gathered information, try to piece together the puzzle and approximate the malicious program's functionality. It's not an easy task, given the multitude of libraries and files. Filtering significant information from insignificant details is crucial. Nevertheless, practice makes perfect. Therefore, I advise analyzing as many files as possible. As an example, I have provided a screenshot of the analysis of one program. You can see that the program imports 3 library files. We also observe several functions, but we are only interested in some of them. For instance, these functions are used for file creation, while these are utilized for elevating access rights. Based on this, we can assume that the program initially attempts to escalate access rights and then will either write or modify a file in system folders. Another possibility is that to elevate access privileges, the program alters the contents of a specific file, perhaps even creates a new one. At this stage, we can't provide a definitive answer. All we can do is to make assumptions. And as always, for analysis, you can use the following programs on both systems. As you can see, basic static analysis cannot provide a clear answer regarding what the malware does. Instead, it allows examining the file's properties to determine if it is malicious or legitimate. However, there are often situations where a definitive answer cannot be given at this stage. Therefore, resorting to more advanced analysis techniques becomes necessary. In this part of the video, we'll explore how to conduct static analysis of portable executable files. We'll perform the analysis using Flare VM. Firstly, check your virtual machine's network settings. I recommend either completely disabling the network adapter or setting it to the internal network mode. In my case, the network adapter is enabled because I've modified the extensions of the analyzed files. Additionally, I'd like to demonstrate some capabilities of analysis programs that require internet access. On my desktop, there are 2 files that we'll analyze. The very first step is to check if this file is known to antivirus programs. For this, there are online services like VirusTotal, MetaDefender. You can upload them to the website, and the service will provide you with a scan result. However, this method has a small drawback. These services have a limit on file uploads. If I'm not mistaken, VirusTotal and MetaDefender currently have a limit of 140 megabytes, although it used to be much smaller. Some virus makers take advantage of this and artificially inflate the file size, preventing its upload and check in these online services. Therefore, there's an alternative method. We compute the file's hash, and then search for this hash in all known databases. It's quite possible that this file has already been analyzed in offline mode, and its signature is already known. To compute the hash, open the file's context menu and select the Has My Files option. The program will compute the file's hash using various known algorithms. To copy the calculated value, hover over it and open the context menu. Here, you can copy the necessary value and then check it in the database. However, there's another method. Again, open the file's context menu and choose the VirusTotal option. As you can see, the file has long been known to many antivirus programs. Now, let's check if the file has been compressed or encrypted. On the desktop, open the folder named Flare. Then navigate to the Utilities folder. What we're interested in there is the program PID. With its help, we can determine whether the file has been processed by a packer and, if so, which one. Run the program. Then select the file for analysis. As you can see, the file has been compressed using the well-known program UPX. The next steps, I believe, are clear. We need to restore the original file and then analyze the remaining artifacts. However, let's approach it a bit differently. We'll try to analyze the current file first to see what artifacts and signs of infection are available to us. Then we'll restore the file and analyze it again. After this, you can compare how different the results are. For analyzing executable files, I would recommend using the program PE Studio, which is also located in the Utilities folder. Load the file to be analyzed into the program. Now, we wait for the file to finish processing. Depending on the file size, this process might take some time. After the file processing is completed, the general file properties are displayed initially. Moreover, on the left side, in red, the sections containing suspicious artifacts, warranting close attention, are displayed. The MZ signature indicates that we are indeed dealing with a portable executable file. In the future, when analyzing a file, if you spot this signature, you can be confident it's an executable file. Next, we notice a high entropy value. It's highly probable that the file underwent encryption and compression. However, this isn't always the case, so at this stage, it cannot be definitively stated. Nonetheless, we already know that the file was processed by the UPX program, which further corroborates this entropy value. Judging by this indicator, the file has a graphical interface. Now, let's switch to the Indicators section. Here, there are generalized signs of maliciousness in the program, which, of course, we'll further analyze. The first indicator suggests that the file is already recognized by many antivirus programs. Additionally, the file uses two blacklisted library files. The following indicators state that section names in the file header bear the name UPX, also blacklisted, indicating the work of the UPX packer. The next indicator informs us that there are two sections with executable code and write permissions in the file header. This shouldn't occur in a normal program. This again points to the packer and possibly indicates that the program is trojanized, meaning it contains extraneous malicious code alongside legitimate code. This indicator tells us that the executable code is self-modifying. This statement holds for polymorphic viruses and worms, capable of altering their code while retaining functionality. The next two indicators suggest that the file uses library functions commonly employed by hackers and hence are blacklisted. Equally intriguing is this indicator. It denotes that the file doesn't contain resources. As you know, the resource section typically contains various icons, images, and more. At the beginning, we saw that the file has a graphical interface. Even the simplest program usually contains at least a couple of icons or images. In this case, the complete absence of a resource section appears rather suspicious. Now, let's delve deeper into these indicators. Let's switch to the virus total section. Here, we see that many antivirus programs are already aware of this file. You can also see the date of the file's last detection. Moving on. Here, we have the file header sections, all labeled with the word UPX in their names. The entropy is normal only in the third section. It wasn't possible to compute it for the first section. And now you'll find out why. Look at the raw size and virtual size parameters in the first section. So, on the disk, the size is 0, but in the RAM, it's 225 kilobytes. Clearly, the packer has been at work here. Additionally, judging by the size, this section likely contains the main executable code. However, if you check the entry point parameter, the UPX1 section is the entry point, meaning it contains the code that gets executed first. Look at the executable parameter. It indicates that both sections contain executable code, which is not typical in regular legitimate programs. Let's move on. The file imports several libraries, but 2 of them are blacklisted. Both files are used for establishing network connections and handling URL links. Why are both library files blacklisted? The reason is that these files are frequently used by worms and viruses to establish connections with their servers. Moreover, attacks on these files are not uncommon, wherein a virus infects one of the files, allowing the malicious program to view and control transmitted data over the network. Now let's check which functions are imported by the file. There aren't that many of them. Only 4 are marked as suspicious. I think there's no point in analyzing these functions at this stage. We'll come back to this when we restore the original file. Let's check what we have in strings. We see names of imported functions and other sets of characters. We won't analyze anything here for now, just remember the number of detected words and phrases. In this case, we see 1444. After restoring the file, the number of strings and imported functions will be much higher. To restore the original file, we can use the same program that was used to compress the file, namely UPX. Fortunately, this utility is also installed on Flare VM, but it operates in a console mode. Let's open the command line and type the UPX command. Here, you see a list of available options for working with the program. Since we need to unpack the file, we'll use the D option for decompression. So, judging by the program output, the file has been successfully restored. Let's run PID again and check for the presence of a packer. As you can see, there are no traces of a packer. Now, let's try to analyze the file again using the PE Studio program. Note that the entropy value has changed. Previously, it was around 8, approximately 7.5 or higher, and now it's 5.8. This time, the indicators show slightly different values. Look at this indicator. Here, we see a link attempting to download an EXE file. We can analyze this link on VirusTotal. Let's do that. And as you can see, 8 antivirus programs have marked it as malicious. Look at the status code. It's equal to 200, which means the link is active. Let's check the header sections. And here, as you can see, everything looks fine. The header sections resemble those of a normal file. However, the resource section is still missing, which is odd for a graphic program. Let's see which library files are being imported. Basically, nothing has changed here. We see the same libraries as before. Now let's check the functions ourselves. This time we see many more functions. Let's go through them and try to approximate the functionality of the program. For our convenience, functions that are often used in malicious programs are marked with a cross in the blacklist column. However, it is not advisable to rely entirely on the program's prompts. Always review all functions. It is quite possible that you will find a function that raises suspicion for you but is not marked by PE Studio itself. In this video, we will not consider absolutely all functions, as it would take quite a lot of time. We will analyze only some of them. For example, the function getCursorPos, judging by the name, returns the position of the mouse on the screen. To verify this, we place the mouse on this indicator and open the context menu. Select the Search MSDN item. A browser will open with the function description. And yes, indeed, the function returns the current mouse position. Next, we see the function getKeyState. From the name, it is quite clear that it returns the current state of the key, whether it's pressed or not. One can assume that this program tries to determine which keys the user is pressing to intercept typed text. We cannot say this for sure. A clearer picture can only be obtained after a complete analysis of all functions, but even in this case, we cannot say with 100% certainty what exactly the program does and in what sequence. We can only make assumptions. Switching to the strings section. If you recall, the first time we had access to 1444 words in ASCII and Unicode. This time we have 1621. The first thing that catches our eye is the word post in all caps. This word is used in the HTTP protocol when transmitting information to a web server. It's quite possible that the program is sending some data to the server, such as text typed by the user. However, it's also possible that the word post in this program is used for other purposes. Next, we see the word amydesk.exe. It appears to be the name of an executable file. Perhaps it is also downloaded from the internet and then executed for malicious purposes. Similarly, the rest of the strings are analyzed. Let's scroll to the very end and see what we have. Pay attention to the highlighted strings. Do they remind you of anything? These strings closely resemble the fields used in emails. Additionally, the SMTP protocol is present here. This protocol is used for sending emails, not for receiving them. Here, it can be confidently stated that the program uses the mail protocol to send emails. But what could be in these emails? Perhaps the file is distributing spam, or maybe it sends copies to everyone to infect as many computers as possible. This reflects the typical behavior of a network worm. As you've seen in practice, the basic static analysis method doesn't provide a clear and specific answer to the question, what does this file do? Instead, this type of analysis provides information about signs or indicators that may directly or indirectly indicate whether a file is harmless or, conversely, dangerous. We found a significant number of suspicious signs. By conducting a more thorough analysis of imported functions and strings, we could gather even more information. Let's analyze another file. In many ways, it's like the first one, but there are still some differences. Therefore, we'll skip some analysis details to avoid repetition. Alright, let's launch PStudio and load our file into it. Switch to the indicators section. In the very first indicator tells us that the file contains another executable file. It also specifies that it's stored in the resource section of the main file. Let's check this section. There are several objects stored in the resources. Most of them are icons, but one of them happens to be an executable file. It's easy to confirm this by the characteristic signature of MZ files in the portable executable format. Let's take a closer look at the contents of the resource section. For this purpose, there's a program called Resource Hacker in the Utilities folder. We launch the program and load the file under Analysis. On the left side of the program, we see those grouped objects that were displayed in PStudio. We're interested in the object named persist, which contains the executable file. On the right side, you can see the bytecode of this file. In the far right, you'll also find ASCII and Unicode code strings, in other words, strings. Let's go through these strings and try to extract some information. As you already know, the MZ signature indicates that the file is in portable executable format. Next, we once again see the words UPX, meaning we can confidently assume that this file was compressed using the UPX packer. Scrolling down to the very bottom, and you see the names of libraries and imported functions. The fact that there's another executable file in the resource section tells us that we should steer clear of this file. However, let's try extracting this file and analyze it in the same way we've done before. To do this, click on the name of the resource object and open the context menu. Here, select the Save Resource to a bin file option, which means saving the file in binary format. Save the file on the desktop. Now let's run the PID program and check whether the file is really compressed or not. And as you can see, that's indeed the case. Let's restore the original file by running the UPX program. Now let's run PE Studio again and see what this file is all about. The file is a library file and was compiled way back in '92. So, it has been in demand among hackers for quite some time now. The indicators also tell us that it's recognized by VirusTotal and suspicious imported functions are used in it. Let's take a closer look at this. On VirusTotal, it's evident that the file is classified differently by various antivirus programs. Some marked it as a backdoor, others as a Trojan stealing passwords and logins. Interestingly, this file was last analyzed on May 18, 2018. So, it's quite likely that there was some sort of campaign for mass computer infection during that time, and since then, it hasn't shown any activity. The file doesn't use many imported functions, which makes our analysis easier. Based on these functions, it can be assumed that the program searches for a specific file in the system and then reads its contents. These functions are used to create new files and folders. They might be temporary or even permanent. They are involved in registry operations. This indicates that specific keys are being read from the registry, and possibly new ones are being created. Perhaps the program is attempting to establish itself within the system to automatically run every time the computer is turned on. In the strings section, we also have some useful information. For instance, this string points to a registry key for program autostart. In the lesson on dynamic analysis, we'll explore certain registry keys commonly used by hackers. These words don't seem to imply anything positive. So, based on the analysis, it can be assumed that this file is auxiliary and serves to create a specific file in the system that will automatically launch along with the system. In this part of the video, we will explore how to analyze malware when it's running. So, what exactly are we interested in and what will we be analyzing? Naturally, we want to know if the program is transmitting any information over the network, such as passwords or user files. Perhaps the program is attempting to download additional files for further computer infection. There might also be a situation where a backdoor is installed on the computer, controlled by a hacker. We want to be aware of all these actions. During its operation, if designed, the malware will attempt to embed itself in the system for automatic startup and further spread across the network. For this purpose, the program will make certain entries in the registry and task scheduler. Moreover, we are also interested in which files are being created or deleted, as well as which programs and processes are launched during the malicious program's activity. We will delve into all these aspects further in this video. So, what should we pay attention to when analyzing network activity? First and foremost, look for DNS requests. Hackers might have their servers in different countries under various IP addresses, yet they can use a single URL to access these servers. If one IP address is blocked or put on a blacklist, others will remain. And the hacker can register additional IP addresses for this URL. We are also interested in the IP addresses themselves. Some Trojans and backdoors are hard-coded to only use specific IP addresses. It wouldn't hurt to check open ports and the associated processes on the analyzed machine. If a backdoor is installed on the computer, it might be waiting for incoming connections from the hacker on a specific port. ICMP and ARP requests are used by network worms to skin a local network and propagate their replicas further. Additionally, ICMP is used for covert data transmission. So, while you may see regular pings, they could be transmitting data and control commands. Detecting the fact of data transmission is quite challenging and can usually only be handled by intrusion prevention systems, known as IPS in English. Consequently, in many organizations, ICMP traffic is often blocked by firewalls. Malware often attempts to disguise its traffic as regular legitimate web traffic, using HTTP and HTTPS protocols. In the latter case, an encrypted channel is created, inside which no one can peek. Some organizations use proxy servers to address this issue. For analyzing network traffic, you can use the following programs. Netstat is already built into all Windows and Linux distributions. The slide showcases some useful Wireshark filters and Netstat options. Wireshark is a network sniffer with numerous useful features. For those unfamiliar with the program, I have prepared a brief video that will help you get acquainted with the basics. Netstat is a console program. We will delve into its workings a bit later. Now, let's determine which steps and in what sequence to apply for a secure analysis. Firstly, launch the Windows Flare VM itself, as well as a fake DNS server on another virtual machine. Both machines should be on an isolated network. Next, it's advisable to run network sniffers, such as Wireshark, on both machines. Using Netstat on the Flare VM, we check all open ports at the current moment. If necessary, note down this information to avoid forgetting it. Then, run the malicious program. Afterward, check what the network sniffer shows us. It's quite possible that nothing will be detected, as not all programs use the network for their activities. If you discover IP addresses or URLs, naturally, verify them in various online databases. Additionally, try to determine the nature of the traffic. Finally, run Netstat again and check for any newly opened ports. If you find a new open port, it's likely a backdoor. As an example, I have provided a screenshot of Netstat in action. For instance, let's focus on TCP port 65000. We also see the process ID responsible for this port. You can apply an additional option B to see the name of the program itself. And you see the program's name. Some program names will closely resemble system ones to confuse users and analysts. Besides the B option, you can launch the task manager and use the process number to find the running program. Here's another example, this time from Wireshark. I applied a DNS filter to display all DNS requests. And here's what we've got. We see that the malicious program is attempting to connect to this server. Analyzing your files, you might encounter a similar scenario. Now, let's discuss how and why to analyze the registry. The registry is essentially a database of settings for the entire Windows system, including user programs. It's responsible for automatically launching programs and services upon computer startup and reboot. To access the registry, simply type regedit in the Start menu. It opens with administrator privileges. I assume you've grasped how malware leverages the registry. If, initially during computer infection, user involvement might have been necessary, for instance, clicking a link, activating a macro, or launching an email received file, the registry helps automate program execution in the future. Thus, when analyzing programs, check these registry branches. This isn't an exhaustive list, but you needn't memorize it, as there are programs that scan the entire registry and display all programs set for automatic startup. The analysis methodology is straightforward. Before running the malware, check the registry. If necessary, take a snapshot, essentially capturing the entire registry. Then, run the program under analysis and let it operate for some time. Afterward, recheck the registry settings. Take a second snapshot and compare it to the first. Keep in mind that both snapshots will have slightly altered values anyway, as any program interacts with the registry. However, your task is to identify changes in registry branches responsible for auto startup. For this analysis, the mentioned programs are suitable. A very useful program is Autoruns, which you can download from the Microsoft website. This program displays all autostart locations, including drivers. So, I highly recommend it. The registry isn't the only way how programs are automatically launched. Task Scheduler also excels in this. I believe many have dealt with it at least once in their lives. The task scheduler offers broad capabilities. You can create a task to launch a program and execute specific commands. Moreover, you can specify precise conditions for the execution. You don't need special programs, everything is already available in Windows itself. You can use the command line or a specialized program with a graphical interface. For analysis, the autoruns program is also very convenient, as besides the registry, it can check the task scheduler too. As an example, here's a screenshot of autoruns in action. Simply switch to the Scheduled Tasks tab, and you'll see current tasks. Moreover, this program can filter system tasks created by the system itself, not by the user. Pay attention to the highlighted task. Other than the name itself, there doesn't seem to be anything suspicious. It launches the command prompt, a legitimate Windows program, and autoruns has identified the program's digital signature. However, on closer inspection, you'll notice the arguments passed to the command prompt. With these arguments, one can forcefully shut down the system without any warning. This example is straightforward, yet certain commands could cause significant harm, and no antivirus can detect them. If you're a command line enthusiast, here's how scheduled tasks look in the console. We see the command being executed triggered by a specific event. To view all the details, you'll have to open the task scheduler itself. Now let's consider how and why to analyze the file system. You already understand that malware can execute various actions in the system. For instance, some might download a DLL file and then inject it into an already running system process. Why is this done? For greater stealth, as in this case, all actions are performed under the guise of a legitimate process, making it very difficult to detect such a process. The analysis principle remains the same as in all previously discussed cases. Meaning, you essentially take a snapshot of a clean file system. Then, after launching the virus or Trojan, take a second snapshot and compare the two. Additionally, during the virus's operation, it's crucial to record all its actions. The depicted programs will assist us in this. We'll explore how to use them through practical examples. In this part of the video, I'd like to provide a brief overview of working with Wireshark. It's a network sniffer. With this program, you can analyze network activity to identify suspicious traffic generated by malware. Therefore, working with this program requires at least basic knowledge of networking technologies. Let's begin. Wireshark is already installed on the Flare VM. Let's launch it. The main window displays a list of installed network interfaces on the analyzed computer. Choose the relevant interface. Next, you need to start capturing packets. You can do this by double-clicking the selected interface or clicking this icon. And as you can immediately see, the program displays all transmitted and received packets. To stop packet capture, click on this icon. Information about network packets is shown in 3 program windows. In the first window, we see a list of packets and brief information about them, such as IP addresses, protocol names, ports. In the second window, we see the contents of the selected packet, meaning all the details. And finally, the third window displays the same data but in hexadecimal format, byte by byte. You can modify this view. For instance, you can disable the third layer displaying bytes. To do so, in the Edit menu, open Preferences. In the window that appears, select Layout. Here, you can choose a convenient layout scheme for the layers and disable unnecessary layers. Now let's configure the columns themselves. After installing the program, columns are displayed, as you can see on the screen. Here, from left to right, you see the packet number. This number is only relevant within this program for your convenience. Then comes the time. Sender and receiver addresses. Protocol name. Packet length. and brief packet information. For instance, let's remove the packet length and add sender and receiver ports. To do this, in the column header area, right-click to open the context menu. Next to the length option, uncheck it so that this column doesn't display. Now, we need to add columns indicating the ports. Again, open the context menu. Select Column Preferences. The familiar settings window opens. Here, you can also remove or add required columns. To add, click on the plus sign. In the Type column, open the drop-down menu to select the necessary parameter. In our case, it's the source and destination port. Now everything is set. If needed, you can rearrange the column order using the mouse. So, various packets are being displayed. Now, let's try filtering out the unnecessary ones. Wireshark offers a wide range of filters. Don't worry, you don't need to memorize them at all. Just remembering the basics is enough, the rest can be easily found and applied. In essence, we don't need complex filters. Some of those will be covered in one of the upcoming lessons. For instance, I need to display DNS packets. To do this, in the filter field, I type the word DNS and press enter. Now, only DNS packets are displayed. It's immediately visible which sites I accessed at that time. Malware can also send DNS requests to obtain an IP address. So, let's try displaying all packets sent to a specific IP address. Click the Expressions button. In the window that opens, you'll see a complete set of all filters. Using these, you can create complex expressions for packet filtering. Since we're interested in an IP address, we need to find a filter that starts with IP. Scroll down the list. We're interested in the destination address filter. Select it. Now, on the right side, choose the corresponding sign, in our case, the equals sign. Finally, at the bottom, input the address. Click OK, and in the filter field, you'll see the completed expression. Now, all that's left is to apply the filter. We'll see all packets where the destination is the specified address. In essence, nothing complicated. And the last point in our video is setting up colors. For each packet type, you can customize its color. This will help visually differentiate various packets and provide information on the presence or absence of specific packets. To do this, go to the View menu and select Coloring Rules. There are already preset rules for some packets here. You can delete or modify them. As an example, let's color all DNS packets yellow. Click the plus button in the bottom left. You need to specify the packet filter. In our case, it's DNS. In the left column, write the name of the rule. Let's call it DNS as well. Now, choose a color. Click OK and see what we've achieved. As you can see, all DNS packets are displayed in yellow. This knowledge will be sufficient for basic network activity analysis. Before we dive into dynamic analysis, it's essential to understand how to use the analytical program ProcMon or Process Monitor. This program is already installed on Flare VM. Open the Flare folder on the desktop, then navigate to Utilities, and then Sysinternals. Launch the ProcMon program as an administrator. With this program, you can track almost all events occurring in the system, such as registry accesses, file reads and writes, process creations, and much more. By running a malicious program, we can track the actions performed by the virus after execution, thus understanding how it operates. In the previous lesson, we discussed Wireshark for capturing network packets. ProcMon, or Process Monitor, is like Wireshark, but in this case, it captures system calls within the operating system. The program isn't complex. Let's start by looking at some control elements on the Programs panel. We won't cover every single element, just the most essential ones. I think the first two icons are self-explanatory and don't require any explanation. This icon, Capture, is used to start and stop the capture of system calls and events. The next button toggles automatic scrolling of intercepted calls on and off. Following that is the button to clear the screen of all calls. In other words, this erases previously captured calls, allowing us to begin a new test. Here we have the button for setting filters. This means we can explicitly specify which system calls we want to see and which ones we don't, or simply indicate which processes interest us. We'll come back to filters later. We won't be discussing these elements as there isn't much need for them now, so let's move on to the next ones. We're interested in these 4 specified buttons. The first one allows displaying all events related to registry activity. Then we have a button responsible for all file events, such as reading, deleting, creating. Next is the button for network events. And finally, the button for all running processes. Now let's examine what is displayed in the main window of the program. You see quite many events or, in other words, system calls. Specific information is displayed in each column. So, from left to right. First is, naturally, the time when the event occurred. Next is the process name, the name of the process or program. When a program or process is running, it is assigned a unique numerical identifier. In the operation column, the action performed by that process is displayed. This could be file reading, establishing a network connection, registry reading, and so on. The path column might show the path to a created or, conversely, deleted file. It could also display the path to a specific registry key or simply a reference. Following that is the result of the operation, whether it was successful or not. And in the detail column, additional information is displayed. You can modify this view and the columns themselves, meaning you can delete some columns and add others. To do this, open Options. Then select Columns. In the window that opens, you can activate the necessary columns. Now let's look at how to use filters. To open the Filter Settings window, you can use the previously discussed button on the control panel or open the corresponding option in the Filter menu. In the window that opens, you can already see the preset filters. They are used to filter out unnecessary system calls generated by programs from Sysinternals. Let's create a filter. For example, let's display all events generated by the Chrome program. From the drop-down list, select the process name option. Next, you need to choose the matching condition. For instance, is means a complete match. Begins with means it starts with. Contains means the searched word is present in the process name, possibly at the beginning, end, or middle. Let's choose contains. Now write the actual process name, which is Chrome. Then there's a list of 2 options, include and exclude. Include means we want events associated with this process to be displayed. Exclude means, conversely, we don't want to see them. Once the filter is ready, click on the Add button. The filter will be immediately added to the list of preset filters. Click on OK and see what gets displayed. As you can see, this process generates quite many system calls. You can create other filters in the same way. Now let's consider another alternative method of creating filters, which might be more suitable for us. Since we don't know in advance what child processes the virus will create, it's very difficult to create an appropriate filter. Therefore, it's easiest to remove all unnecessary processes. To begin, briefly start capturing calls. You'll immediately see many system calls generated by the current processes in the system. Let's try to remove them. Select a specific call and open the context menu. Here, you'll see several options with the word exclude. choose the appropriate option. As you can see, all system calls associated with this process have disappeared. In the same way, remove the other calls until the main window is empty. Afterward, you can restart the call capture and launch the virus itself. The program will display the calls directly or indirectly related to the running virus. Keep in mind that it's highly advisable not to keep the call capture active for too long, as even within a short time, a huge number of events are generated, and your memory might not suffice to process such a volume of data. With this, we can conclude your introduction to the program. I hope everything was clear. In this part of the video, we'll practically demonstrate basic dynamic analysis. We'll run the same file that we analyzed using the static method. Since the file is malicious, it's crucial to thoroughly check all the network settings. For analysis, we'll need to run both Flare VM and Kali, with Kali acting as a server simulator. Therefore, on these virtual machines, we should set up the internal network mode. Now let's launch Kali. Firstly, we need to set up static IP addresses. We can now start initsim, but before that, it's essential to verify the program settings to ensure everything works correctly. Open the terminal and enter the command initsim. To intercept all packets generated by the virus on Flare VM, let's also launch Wireshark. The virtual machine is fully prepared. Let's switch to Flare VM. Here, we'll also set up static IP addresses within the same range as on Kali. Don't forget to set the correct gateway address and DNS server. Now let's check if everything is functioning. To do this, we'll run the ping command to any website and open a random site in the browser. Everything is working. Let's see what's on Kali. We can see intercepted packets here as well. Let's restart it to ensure these packets don't interfere with our subsequent analysis. Now, from the administrator account on Flare VM, let's run the autoruns program located in the Flare /utilities /Sysinternals folder. After launching, the program begins scanning the system to detect auto-start points. Let's wait until the process finishes. Once the scanning process is complete, at the bottom of the program, you'll see the status ready. Let's save the current state for future comparison. To do this, open the File menu and select Save. Now, you can close the program. Let's run another useful utility. It allows us to track changes in the registry and throughout the file system. So, if a folder was created or a new file was added, the program will notify us about it. The principle of operation is straightforward. First, we take the initial system snapshot and save it. Then, after running the virus, we'll take a second snapshot and compare it to the first one. Do not close the program. From the same folder, run ProcMon as an administrator. As I've shown you before, here, we clear the main window from unnecessary system calls. After setting up the filters, initiate the interception of system calls. Well, we are ready to launch the virus. Let's begin. On the screen, you can see a message box displaying the name of the simulator program, initsim. Most likely, the virus attempted to download and execute some file. Naturally, initsim provided a different, safer file. Notice that the file itself disappeared after execution. Now, let's stop capturing calls on Process Monitor. We'll analyze that a little later. Let's switch to Kali and stop our simulator using the Ctrl+C keyboard combination. After stopping, the program generated a report located in the specified folder. Let's look at it. We see several DNS requests to various sites, but most of them don't pose a threat. This can be confirmed by checking them on VirusTotal and similar services. Moreover, most of them belong to Microsoft. Most likely, these requests weren't generated by our virus. However, the most interesting part is at the bottom. The launched virus made a request to the site we found in strings during static analysis. It attempted to download a file, but instead of that, initsim offered to download a different, safer file. Here, you also see where this file is located. If desired, you can download the file from that site and then place it in the initsim folder for further analysis. Now, let's look at Wireshark. Enter the word DNS in the filter field. We see the same requests intercepted by the initsim program. The HTTP filter will display HTTP requests. As a precaution, let's also check ARP and ICMP requests, perhaps the virus attempted network scanning. However, there's nothing noteworthy here either. Let's switch back to Flare VM. On Flare VM, let's run autoruns again and check if the virus created an auto-start point. Wait until the program scans the entire system. Now, let's compare the current state with the previous one. To do this, select the Compare option from the File menu. Here, we're prompted to specify the system snapshot for comparison. And there are no changes, meaning the virus didn't alter the auto-start settings. We'll further confirm this during the analysis in ProcMon. Let's return to the Remnux program. Take a second snapshot. Now, let's compare it to the first one. You can see quite a few changes, especially in the registry. This is a normal occurrence as various processes constantly occur in the system, and nothing remains unchanged. Therefore, our task is to find the significant changes. We see that new registry keys were added. Whether this was done by our virus or another program, we'll determine through analysis using Process Monitor. Here, we see the added folders. Further down, we see deleted files. And here, we spot the very file we executed. Immediately after launch, it was deleted without our involvement. Moving on. Take note of this entry. This is precisely the file the virus attempted to download. And as we see, it was placed in a new folder. By the way, this folder was also created by the virus. In this section, we also see numerous entries. I don't think they hold any particular interest for us. We'll ascertain this during the analysis in Process Monitor. In Process Monitor, we observe a considerable number of system calls and events. There's no need to analyze absolutely everything. Let's focus on some key points. Firstly, we're interested in the processes the executed virus created. To do this, keep the Processes option active on the Program panel and disable all others. We see our virus along with the programs AmiDesk and SCAR UPnP logon. If you recall, the name amidesk.exe was detected in strings during static analysis. Here, we observe the virus launching it. This indicates that this file was already present in the system or was created immediately after the main file was executed. However, in the Remnux program, this file was not detected, which could also imply it was created temporarily and later deleted. Next, we see the conhost.exe process, which is a system helper program. I don't believe it's necessary to analyze the scarabnplogon process as its file is fake. However, the amydesk process might be of interest to us. We see that it was launched by our virus. To confirm this, let's open the process tree on the Program Control panel. The process executed by the virus is the main parent to both the amydesk and scarupnplogon processes. Take note of the file system location from where these files were executed. Interestingly, the WebKit folder was in the Reg shop program output. Now, let's activate only the registry-related events. Here, we have a vast number of registry accesses, but our interest lies in whether the program attempted to alter registry settings or not. Therefore, let's open the filter. Select operation, that is, the action. Then, from the list, choose the regSetValue function. Click on Add, then Apply. These details make it easier to work with. Judging by the registry branch names, it's clear the virus attempts to alter some network settings. For instance, the first entry indicates the proxy server was disabled. Why was this done? In many organizations, Internet access occurs through specific corporate proxy servers. These servers control the traffic passing through and try to block suspicious requests and downloaded files. Proxy server settings are configured manually and automatically. The Web Proxy Autodiscovery Protocol serves for automatic configuration, functioning through DHCP or DNS. You can see the settings for this protocol on the screen. Apparently, the virus decided to act with certainty to guarantee the download of the required file. Next, the virus changes the network security zone settings. On Windows, there are 5 such zones. Now, let's look at file events. Again, we won't analyze all events. Initially, let's try to identify the files created after the launch. The createFile function is responsible for file creation, but it's also used to open existing files. Therefore, let's create a filter to display events related to createFile. This is better, but it also includes DLL files opened by this function. Let's filter those out too. Now, we need to understand which files were created. For example, the amydesk file stands out. Let's view the properties of this event. And here, the operation result is indicated, created. Now, let's check the next event. Here, the file was opened. Other files are analyzed in the same way. Our task is to find created and deleted files. Therefore, apply various filters to see the whole picture. Now, let's summarize the analysis briefly. The file attempts to download a certain file from the internet, also marked as malicious. To maximize success in downloading, the virus tries to alter some network settings in the registry. After downloading the file, it's immediately executed. The downloaded file is saved in the WebKit folder, while the virus deletes itself after execution. No other actions behind this viral file were noticed. Based on this, it can be classified as a regular viral downloader or, in other words, a downloader. Let's now explore the specifics of analyzing Microsoft Office files. You'll learn how hackers leverage MS Office capabilities and how to determine whether a document is potentially dangerous or not. Firstly, let's understand the existing file formats. The very first format was the so-called binary format. The file structure is quite complex and was unavailable to the public for some time. Files of this format have extensions, as shown on the slide. It's impossible to determine from the extension alone whether the document contains macros or not. Hackers often take advantage of this by creating viral files with these extensions. The second format widely used to this day is based on XML files. Files of this format already have 4-letter extensions. Based on the 4th letter, you can determine the file type, whether it's a regular static document or with macro support. Essentially, files of this format are zip archives of multiple XML files. This can easily be confirmed by unzipping any Office file. Let's now consider the methods hackers use to infect victims' computers. Very often, they exploit vulnerabilities in various versions of Office documents that open and process files. For instance, Office 2007 may contain one set of vulnerabilities while Office 2013 contains different ones. These vulnerabilities are usually associated with file parsing. As you know, file structures are quite complex, increasing the probability of errors. Therefore, Microsoft regularly publishes detected vulnerabilities and errors, consistently releasing updates intended to fix existing issues. Another method widely favored by hackers is the use of macros. Macros are small programs written in Visual Basic for applications. They can execute immediately upon opening a document. These programs have quite extensive capabilities. They can interact with the operating system, download files from the internet, and much more. Macro support is entirely legitimate, yet for many hackers, it opens additional opportunities. Lately, the use of DDE and OLE objects has also gained popularity. Dynamic Data Exchange or DDE is a protocol developed by Microsoft for dynamic data exchange between different files and programs. For example, you create a text document in Microsoft Word and insert a table from another Microsoft Excel file. Moreover, you continuously update this table. Thus, when you open the Word document, the program automatically requests updates for the table from the Excel file. Consequently, the table in your document will always contain up-to-date data. And this is just one example. OLE technology, also known as object linking and embedding, is an extension of the DDE technology but with broader functionality. Now, let's examine the sequence of analyzing a suspicious file. On the slide, there are 7 steps outlined, but this sequence is rather conditional and suggested as recommended. Naturally, it all depends on the specific goals you pursue during the analysis. If you merely need confirmation that the file is dangerous, stopping at the first or second step is sufficient. However, if you aim to thoroughly study the file's behavior, it's advisable to go through all the steps. How to understand if a file is dangerous without running it? There are specific artifacts that indirectly or directly indicate what the file does upon opening. Firstly, pay attention to the file extension. Binary format files are the most dangerous since at first glance, it's impossible to determine if they contain macros. Hackers can create a regular XML format file with macro support. Such a file, as you know, has the extension docm. However, it's easy to change the extension to doc by simply removing the m. The macro itself doesn't disappear in this case. Hackers often exploit built-in capabilities of PowerPoint applications without embedding the macro itself. Also, the presence of OLE objects might raise suspicion. This doesn't automatically make the file dangerous. Many OLE objects are used for legitimate purposes, but it's always necessary to verify. During the analysis, you might discover links. Always check them in the HOIS database and various blacklists where this link might have appeared. Many antivirus companies have their publicly available blacklists. And of course, the presence of the macro itself is suspicious. Again, this doesn't automatically label the file as dangerous, but if you see obfuscated code, it's almost certain that it's a malware. Regarding API functions, they're usually accessible when the code itself is extracted and converted into an EXE file for further analysis. It's also beneficial to check the file for strings or phrases in ASCII and Unicode encoding. You might find something interesting. You can conduct this analysis at an early stage or after the macro code has been extracted and converted into an EXE file. Now that we know what to look for, we'll need programs to conduct a thorough analysis. First and foremost, I recommend a standard zip archiver. With it, you can decompose an Office file into its components and identify suspicious objects. Keep in mind that this action is applicable to Office OpenXML format files. VBA and OLE objects are in specific folders that you should be aware of. Immediately after unpacking, you can use the Notepad program to view the contents of VBA and OLE files. Most of the data will be in binary format, displaying as a seemingly random set of characters. However, you may spot ASCII and Unicode words and phrases. To obtain a fully readable code, we can use the following program. And this is where Office Mal Scanner comes in handy. This program runs on Windows in console mode. It's already installed on Flare VM. The slide provides examples of running the program to scan files of different formats. Note that binary files are scanned with the info option, while XML files are scanned with the inflate option. Here's what the program's output looks like. It's immediately noticeable that the file is in XML format. The program detected a macro. Since the macro is a binary file, the program isolated and converted it into a readable format for us, saving it in the specified folder. We can safely open this file in Notepad and review the entire code. Furthermore, a suspicious link to another file was detected. Here's another example of the program's operation. Here, we analyzed a binary Office file. You can see the detected macro function names. They appear as complete gibberish. Most likely, this was done intentionally, which clearly doesn't favor this file. And as you can see on the slide, the macro was isolated into the corresponding folder. Equally useful programs are OLVBA and OLDump. They're written in Python and are already installed on both Flare VM and Remnux. These programs scan both formats of Office documents and immediately display the detected macro code on the screen. Additionally, they display indicators at the end that can directly or indirectly indicate the presence of a virus. On the slide, you see a screenshot of the analysis of a malicious document. The program identified the file type as Office OpenXML and displayed the macro code. This screenshot displays the next segment of the file analysis. As you can see, indicators of infection are displayed at the end. I also recommend familiarizing yourself with other programs. Each program is tailored to perform specific actions and can provide additional information about the analyzed file. Now let's explore the basic methods of analyzing Office documents for signs of malicious activity. We'll conduct the analysis in Flare VM. We won't run the file, but I've disconnected the network connection, nonetheless. For analyzing Office files in Flare VM, we have access to tools from the OLE-Tools toolkit, as well as Office Mal Scanner. This should be sufficient for our initial analysis. On my desktop, I have the files that we'll be analyzing. Let's start by examining the first file. The file has a docm extension, indicating it's an OpenXML file with macro support. However, it's important not to blindly trust this extension as it can be easily changed. So, first, let's try to determine the file type. We're running the OLE program and specifying the name of our file. Pay attention to the OLE format false line. This means the file isn't binary, instead, it supports the OpenXML format. For further analysis, we need to modify some parameters in the command prompt. Right-click on the program header and in the context menu, select Properties. In the Layout tab, adjust the screen buffer size values to see the complete output of the programs. I recommend setting them to maximum values. Also, consider changing the window width, for example, to 150. Now let's run the Office Mal Scanner program with the inflate option. As you already know from the presentation, this option is used with OpenXML format files. Pay attention to the program's output, especially the lines highlighted in yellow. We see that the file indeed contains a macro. Further down, we're given the following hint. It states that the file was unzipped, and its contents are in the specified folder. Additionally, the macro itself is in a separate file, and for its analysis, We can again use the Office Mouse Scanner program but with different options. Now let's navigate to the specified folder. We see the familiar list of files. The macro itself is in the Word folder. Let's try opening this file in Notepad. We see gibberish characters, indicating that the file is binary. Let's follow the program's advice and analyze this file, but this time with the info option. We see two functions, new macros in this document. At the bottom, we're also given a hint the binary file was converted into a text file and is in the specified folder. Now, let's try opening these two files in Notepad. And we see code. If you're proficient in Visual Basic, you can easily read and understand it. However, if you're unfamiliar with this language, at least skim through the code and try to grasp the functions involved. The very first function is auto-open. It triggers immediately upon opening the document. In it, we also see a condition and a call to one of the functions, execute for OS X and execute for Windows. This suggests that the program attempts to identify the operating system it's running on and then calls the corresponding function. This is for Windows. And this is for Mac OS. In the Windows function, we see the creation of an object using the createObject function. To learn more about this and other functions found, you may try to find their descriptions online. Next, a file with the extension exe is created, likely containing program code. Then it's executed. Essentially, this information is enough to say that the file is, if not malicious, then highly suspicious and dangerous. To get more detailed information, one needs to be adept at reading Visual Basic code. But another approach could have been taken. Since the file supports the OpenXML format, we could simply unzip the file using a zip utility. This way, we'd see those XML files. Let's try doing that. And we get the same result. Now, the binary file containing the macro can be analyzed in Office Mouse Scanner. The method described above is quite lengthy and not very convenient. Therefore, let's use another utility called alevba. Let's open the terminal again and enter the corresponding command. And here's the result. At the end, a table is displayed with detected indicators of malicious characteristics. They don't provide a detailed description of the program's workings, but they can give a general overview, which is often sufficient. Based on the results, it's clear that the macro creates and runs a certain file, and it can also execute system commands. Also, links are provided at the bottom. If necessary, they can be analyzed on VirusTotal or any other online scanner. To see the actual code, you can scroll up a bit. This concludes the analysis. We found malicious indicators and determined the approximate functionality of the program. Now, let's consider another file. Firstly, let's attempt to determine the file type again. Take note of the program output. We see that the document type is binary, indicating an older format of Office documents. Moreover, it's a Word document. We also observe that it contains a macro. Now, let's try to determine the file's metadata. We'll use the Elementa program for this. What should we pay attention to? Firstly, the file's author. It's clearly altered. If the file wasn't created for malicious purposes, we would see a more coherent text. Next, we're interested in the document creation date. Judging by the date, we can assume that the file might already be familiar to some antivirus programs, and perhaps some information about it already exists in an online database. Furthermore, the document consists of only one page, not a single word, just one character. Doesn't that strike you as highly suspicious? The company name also doesn't indicate the legitimacy or harmlessness of this file. Well then, let's start analyzing the code. On the screen, you see the result of the ELEVBA program's work. The code is rather peculiar and intricate. Understanding its execution is quite complex. At first glance, it contains numerous variables and mathematical operations. This was intentionally done to confuse analysts and antivirus programs. We won't analyze every function or compute each variable, but we'll take a different approach. We'll attempt to emulate the macro execution using a special program and see what comes out of it. There's a project available on github.com designed for Office file analysis. Within this project, a program called ViperMonkey was developed, capable of emulating macro execution. The program is written in Python, so it can be installed on both Windows and Linux. Since the program isn't installed on Flare VM and Remnux, our first step will be to install it. The website provides installation instructions, but in this video, we'll do it together. We'll install it on Remnux because, unfortunately, it didn't work for me on Windows for some reason. Open the terminal and enter the following command. ViperMonkey will be installed automatically. On my computer, this program is already installed, so I'll skip this procedure. After the installation, it's essential to check if everything is working. To do this, enter the following command in the terminal. Now let's proceed with further analysis. On my desktop, there's that very file. Let's try analyzing it in ViperMonkey. The process has begun. Keep in mind that analysis may take some time in certain cases. After analysis, a table displays the processing results. Here, it's evident that the macro attempts to execute a rather lengthy command in PowerShell. The command contains many digits. The hacker also attempted to obfuscate commands and arguments to confuse analysts. Look at the end of the output. It contains commands used in programming to organize loops. Additionally, we see the use of the XOR function within the loop. This function is applied to obfuscate content within macros and shell codes. So, most likely, after executing this lengthy command, a loop is triggered, decoding the entire command, and then passing it to the system for execution. I believe we've encountered enough suspicious indicators to confidently label this as a malicious program. If desired, you can execute this command and monitor all processes in the system. In this case, we proceed just as we would in dynamic analysis.